in part of my experience when I moved back to Nigeria for about 7 years, I kept quiet and absorbed a lot of information. I didn't want to come into Nigeria with all of these preconceived ideas of what Nigeria is, because again, I hadn't lived there. I didn't grow up there. I grew up in America for the most part. So I didn't want to come in with my naivete and just allow my naivete to direct my path, because that was gonna Lagos will humble you. Okay, it humbled me.
All right, what's up, family? Sita Dumbuya here. We're back again with it. Hey, we being consistent now. You got to give it to us. All right, so I'm gonna pass it to Shawty Lou Ellen. That's the nickname I gave you in case you didn't know.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that's your nickname. So I'm passing it to Lou Ellen so he can actually introduce our guest and get us kicked off.
Now I guarantee the folks who know me are gonna put it in the comments now, and they're gonna call me that. So there you go. Thank you. I
welcome.
appreciate it. What's going on, fam? So we have somebody who is a dear friend of mine. We have known each other since we basically grew up together. We've known each other for the last 17 years. Chinenye, I knew her. I just want to put this out there. For the last 17 years, I knew her as Chinenye Monde. Recently, in the last week or two, I've discovered she's been allowing us to call her the wrong name, or mispronounce her name rather. So I want her to go ahead and tell us how to pronounce her name the correct way with the Nigerian emphasis. Go ahead.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Chinenye Monde Anumihe. Lovely to meet you. So excited to be on this show, this episode with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to this conversation and all that you bring to the table. Chinenye is very multi-talented, multifaceted. She's worked with so many wonderful people. She has lifted up so many wonderful people. She's a businesswoman and business mind in her own right. And we're going to get into a wonderful discussion to talk about what she does and what she does in Nigeria. And she actually lives here in the U.S. now. But before we do that, we have the one. What you want to say something?
No, I was gonna say, hey, you got it.
Okay. Before we do that, we have our Wahala segment. Wahala segment.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
And this one was chosen specifically because I know you and I know topics that you like to discuss. And so this one, I'm going to read a quote. I want to hear your thoughts about said quote. This is not really a silly topic, really, but it is something that's interesting, and I think that people want to hear about it. So the quote is thus: I am Nigerian because a white man created Nigeria and gave me that identity. I am black because the white man constructed black to be as different as possible from his white. But I was Igbo before the white man came. My point is that the only authentic identity for the African is the tribe. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
I was about to say that's Chimamanda. I knew it from the first 3 words you said. So what are my thoughts on that?
What are your thoughts? Exactly.
That is an extremely loaded, it's a charged topic. And Chimamanda, I admire so much. I had the honor and pleasure of meeting her last year.
Wow.
And she's a writer. Actually, I met her for the second time last year. The first time I met her, she came to my university, Syracuse University in New York, when I was still in school. And I think it was 2012, just after she wrote Americana. And we had a brief chit chat then, and then we had another brief chit chat several years later in 2023. I'm coming from a bit of bias because we're from the same tribe. So Chimamanda and I were both Igbo, and we have a very strong sense of our Igbo tribal identity. So, I mean, I'm Igbo, I'm also Nigerian, and I very much claim both identities. I also claim my American identity, and I'm extremely proud of it. So, there's a lot of history behind what she said, and I think it can go in a particular direction. I don't know if we have a lot of time to go down that history, but I will say that the Igbo tribe is a very, very strong it's a strong tribe in the sense that we carry the identity with us. We carry a lot of history with us. And yes, we do recognize in Nigeria that it was amalgamated. The country of Nigeria was amalgamated and is a country of over how many hundreds of tribes, hundreds of languages. So it has been quite a complex issue identifying as Nigerian because it is a very recent identification. For since time immemorial, we have existed as tribes, but it is very recent for us to have existed as Nigerian. So I will stop there on that subject.
See, so what you think? What's your thoughts?
Nah, I mean, I understand it because Sierra Leone's the same way. Even like in Nigeria, Igbo and Yoruba are like the dominant tribes. From the perspective of me being in Sierra Leone, both my mom and dad's tribes are not the dominant tribe. The dominant tribes in Sierra Leone are Mende and Timni. So I can understand how, you kind of identify with your particular tribe, but at the same time, we're all kind of working together as a country. And at the same, it's like we didn't create the boundaries of the country. We didn't create the country. So we didn't create Sierra Leone. So to expect all of us to be able to work together on one accord when we have all these different groups or all these different interests, that can be something that's very challenging. But for me, it's more so about practicality. Unless we have a solution that allows us to go back to the tribal identity and put that in the forefront, I think it makes more sense to understand that we have different interests and align on what's important. I think that's Black people in general. We don't need to be unified, but we need to be codified. So we can all have our individual identities. We don't need to come together on that. But when we understand that we all have a common enemy and that we work together as it relates to how we approach that common enemy and how we need to be moving to make sure that we're protected against that common enemy, I think that that's where we really need to focus. So if everything doesn't align, cool. But in certain areas, we need to be on the same code.
I agree. I think for Liberia, I actually had this conversation with somebody a few days ago. They're American, and they were asking just about Liberia and things like that in Liberian history. And I told them, I told them that Liberia has many tribes, and they were like, "Well, what was Liberia called before settling and things like that?" And I was like, "You know what? I don't know. I think it was just the tribes had their boundaries, and that was it. The tribes knew where they were, and that was it." And I think the same way. Like, I'm Liberian because that's what the boundary set on the map. But and I think that's how a lot of Africans feel. They, like, when white people went over, they didn't care about
Yeah.
destroying or dividing tribes. They just drew lines based on what they thought was.
And they
what
did that on purpose. They prefer to destroy, and divide
exactly.
tribes as opposed to
Exactly, which is
strengthen
why
them.
I always say I respect Nigerians so much because y'all have been able, like, most of the Nigerians I know are between Yoruba and Igbo. I think most are actually Igbo, and y'all have been able to those tribes have been able to really stick together regardless of what colonization did and to separate. So I have a high amount of respect for that because I know even between Liberia and Sierra Leone, and I think even I want to say maybe some part of Guinea as well. Like the Mandingo tribes are all except in between all of those. Crew is between Liberia and Sierra Leone.
Yeah.
You can be from the Crew tribe but be Liberian, or from the Crew tribe and be Sierra Leonean.
Yeah.
And so the tribes have been split based off that. So I have a high level of respect for y'all for that.
And I think there's there's quite a concerted effort to reinforce the division amongst us by weaponizing the differences, right? Weaponizing the tribe. And it always happened around very convenient times of elections in Nigeria. You're reminded there's this otherism that is introduced into the election discourse, that you can't trust this person because they're Efik or they're Tiv or they're Biram. These are other tribes that you probably haven't heard of, but they all exist. Just that the predominant ones or the largest ethnic or tribal groups are Igbo, Yoruba, and Hausa. So we will be existing peacefully, coexisting, intermarrying, thriving amongst each other. But when it's expedient politically, when it's convenient, especially during election seasons or times where there's some sort of national dialogue, we often find that divide and conquer is reintroduced. And then you're now told you can't trust that he's Hausa, she's Yoruba, he's Igbo. And it's extremely dangerous for Nigeria to evolve and to develop into the powerhouse that it should be, the powerhouse that it should be continentally and also internationally, if you always have this ethnic undertone in some of our politics, which is inherently divisive and retroactive or regressive, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to move into the interview now and talk a little bit more about you and your background and what brought you to what you're doing now. So like Sita and I, you were born and raised in the US.
Nope.
But well, not born and raised, but you were raised
I was born in Nigeria, but yes,
born
I was raised in the US.
Raised in the US. Okay.
What city in Nigeria?
I was born in Enugu in
Okay.
southeast Nigeria.
Southeast Nigeria. What state is that?
The city is Enugu and the state is also called Enugu.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn. I know.
Yeah, no,
I'm
yeah,
trying to learn.
yeah. And so what made you decide to want to go back and once you got educated?
Sorry,
What's up,
my
kiddo?
nephew,
Hey.
darling.
What's up, kiddo?
What made me want to go back?
Yeah, what made you decide to go back after finishing school?
I'm
'Cause I know you
going
were.
outside
Okay, babe.
to play.
Where's,
But I'm waiting for my mom and dad
where's mommy?
in the basement.
Okay, can you go to mommy and tell her you want to go outside?
I already told her.
Okay.
He said she's not listening.
Okay, so
Hi.
okay, go ahead. Darling.
Adorable.
So what made me want to move back to
What made
Nigeria?
you
Or?
what was the inspiration to move back to Nigeria, and what were you doing when you first got there?
Okay. So okay, I left Nigeria when I was about 3 months old. There was we were under military dictatorship at the time, and it wasn't an ideal environment for us to be raised. So my mother took me and my sisters, and we left. We were in the UK for 6 years before my mom won the visa lottery to come to America. And so I was raised in America. I did first grade all the way to my bachelor's degree in the US before I continued and did other things. So after my bachelor's degree, I did my master's in Geneva, Switzerland. And my educational background is international relations and political science. And then I did international law and human rights in Geneva, Switzerland. Before I moved to Nigeria in 2014, Nigeria was not on, I was not interested in living in Nigeria. I'm pretty sure, you guys as Africans, you might have had the same threat that I had. If you don't do your work, if you don't go to school, if you don't get good grades, they will send you to Africa, and it wasn't appealing. In fact, it was the scariest thing that you could possibly be threatened with, right? Because at that point, they're threatening you with, the disciplinary system. And in my head, I was going to be there fetching water and, cleaning and being treated like a house girl. I was mortified of that entire idea. So going back to Nigeria was like, no, please, anything but Nigeria. Up until 2012, when my mom was like, okay, I know that I've painted this picture of Nigeria as this like scary place to be, but it's actually a vibe. So let me start taking you back for Christmas, for the holidays. And so I think I did my first Christmas in Nigeria in like 2012, 2011, I think it was 2012. And so I was in Lagos, I was in Abuja, and I was like, this is not what I thought it was. We stayed in a hotel, we went to visit family, we had barbecues, we had weddings, traditional weddings, white weddings. We had a really good time. And I was like, wait a second, you taught me my whole life that this place was like, this, again, it was like a threat. It was a punishment, basically. And I actually, as a teenager, I guess, into my adulthood, I was actually seeing a completely different side of it. And again, because I'm interested in international relations and political science, even though I'm coming back for Christmas and we're just turning up and having a good time, I started actually developing an interest in our political landscape, our socioeconomic issues, challenges, and started thinking about potential ways that I could contribute to the society. After I completed my master's in 2014, I decided to complete my national youth service. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but Nigeria has this sort of mandatory national youth service that every graduate is meant to undertake. So it's 1 year of service where you're posted to a state. You for, I think it's 3 weeks. Yeah, go to camp for 3 weeks and you basically spend a year serving your fatherland, is what we call it. And I did. So I did my youth service here in 2014. I did my passing out ceremony. We call it passing out ceremony in 2015. And no, was it 2015? Yes, I did my passing out ceremony in 2015. And from that point on, I was interested and invested in Nigeria and its socioeconomic issues. Once again, my background is international relations, political science. So I already had the frame of mind of how can I contribute? How can I give back? How can I be part of this ecosystem and understand ways that I can impact the lives of Nigerians as a Nigerian, especially from the diaspora. I will say something really quickly. I learned a term, I think it's called third culture kid. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but third culture kid is basically where you are not 100% American and you're not 100% African or 100% Nigerian in my case. You are kind of this like blended third culture mix of the two. So I've had this identity issue my whole life. I wasn't really fitting in with my American friends entirely because I still had that very strong sense of if you do wrong, if you do anything, it will send you back to Nigeria. But then I also wasn't fully Nigerian. I would get called Oyibo and like Ajibo and all these other types of, oh, she's from abroad. So I was sort of in this in-between third culture where I didn't fully fit in either bucket. And it did quite a number on me identity-wise, but the older I got, the more I started developing my own interests and focusing on what I wanted to contribute to Nigerian society. I've said a lot, so I'm gonna stop there.
No, that makes sense, especially that third culture thing. That's been repeated multiple times on this show. One of our first guests, she's Liberian, is Llewellyn's cousin. She has a fashion brand, and she talked about the same thing growing up in Cobb County, but identifying as like African, and she's a little fair skinned, so it's like she was catching hell from both sides of you're not really American, you're African, and I'm sure you got made fun of
Yeah.
by being African because kids love to roast. Like kids gonna roast. They call you the African booty scratcher. They gonna hit you with the clicks. They gonna do all of that, and your mama walk around naked and live in all of that.
Why does
So
your food smell like that? Yeah.
yeah, it's like you catch hell from both sides. But now we're in this moment where African culture is embraced, and
Yeah.
particularly Black Americans, diaspora, everybody's embracing it. So that kind of we're on the back end of that. People are at least more open to exploring the different cultures, and I think that's good. It's needed. It's long overdue. But I can understand just that whole point of having that identity crisis and feeling like you don't fit into either side.
Yeah.
So, Shanae, when you got to Nigeria and you planted roots, again, I because I'm talking to you as somebody who also kind of knows you. I know where your mind is at. A lot of times, you're like, okay, let me see how I can, in the words of John Lewis, how I can cause some good trouble. Let me see what I can shake up around here. So, what were some of the things that made you want to say, all right, I want to tap into that. And how did you do it? I know like that I'm asking that question because from my point of view, that was me when I first went to Liberia. My mind was like, okay, I need to tap into this and that. So I'm assuming great minds think alike that it's probably something that happened with you as well.
Okay. Wow. Man, these questions. There's a lot here. So I'm gonna say something, and I really wish I could quote her correctly, but I'll summarize what she said. In 2020, I went to a conference. It's the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And one of the sessions I attended, there was this South African woman, phenomenal woman, and she said something that resonated with me to this day. So she pretty much was, I think, running for a local government position in her township in South Africa. And she pretty much told me about the struggle that she encountered as a woman running in her township, and there were so many stereotypes and issues and challenges that she faced as a woman, a young woman especially. But what she said was like she did the grunt work, and that lended credibility to everything she was pursuing in her legislative seat. She did the grunt work in the sense that she rolled up her sleeves and she went into the communities. She learned the language. She learned the the struggles at the very, very grassroots level, at the local level. She began to speak in a way that they understood, that she understood their challenges. She did the grunt work. She showed up at the at the council meetings and at the town hall meetings and at the community meetings and women's meetings and things like that in villages and rural communities. She did the grunt work. So when she was able to contest for her legislative seat, she stood on the authority of, I've done the work. I'm saying that because in part of my experience when I moved back to Nigeria for about 7 years, I kept quiet and absorbed a lot of information. I didn't want to come into Nigeria with all of these preconceived ideas of what Nigeria is, because again, I hadn't lived there. I didn't grow up there. I grew up in America for the most part. So I didn't want to come in with my naivete and just allow my naivete to direct my path, because that was gonna, Lagos will humble you. Okay, it humbled me. So I didn't want to come into Nigeria with my naivete alone and try to operate based on that. So I instead came into Nigeria and I rolled up my sleeves. I did the grunt work. I volunteered with local nonprofit organizations my entire time. Every Saturday, I was in a different community. I was in Apapa, I was in Idiaraba, I was in communities up and down Ikorodu. I was everywhere I could be every single week. And I did my very best to learn about the challenges of those respective communities and see ways we could support them. So I volunteered with an organization which I have so much love and respect for, called the Lagos Food Bank Initiative. And each Saturday, they pretty much prepare to serve a particular community. They now have a nutrition program, which helps basically bring awareness to food insecurity and the nutrition challenges that are leading to infant mortality and things like that. So that grunt work of rolling up my sleeves, keeping my mouth shut, and learning for as long as I needed to understand the context and the environment that I'm in. And I found that that was important because when I was doing my master's in Geneva, Switzerland, I felt like a lot of the international organizations, especially those in Geneva, are so disconnected from the communities that they're meant to serve or that they are serving. And I was really worried about me becoming one of those same people sitting in a desk in Geneva, basically drafting international laws or standards or frameworks based on context that I don't have a full understanding of. So I wanted to make a very concerted effort to be present in the communities that I wanted to understand, and that would lend credibility and that would allow me to speak authoritatively on certain topics in Nigeria. So I can speak confidently on the challenges in some of these communities in Lagos that I was able to serve. I can speak confidently on some of the challenges, especially in the southeast state that I'm from, Imo State, because I spent the time in those communities and gathering all that information to support my the trajectory that I'm on. So I would say, and I would offer this as advice, anyone, especially those of us who are privileged enough to be in the diaspora and who are looking to come back, when you do come back, I encourage you, whatever time you're able to, spend time in whatever community you're interested in, roll up your sleeves, do the grunt work, and that will give you the credibility. Don't worry about being third culture. Don't worry about them calling you foreigner or whatever. As long as you are there and present, they'll be like, you know what? This guy or this girl is actually serious about this. I didn't speak my language, by the way. I know we haven't really talked about language yet, but unfortunately, I didn't learn my language when I was growing up. I'm learning it now. I'm 33 years old and I have no shame whatsoever. I have an elementary school teacher who teaches me on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays every single week. I have no
That's
shame because
that's
it is so
dope. Yeah.
important to me to learn my language and to authentically communicate with my elders, because that's something it's something that's important to me. So yeah.
No, I love that because language is one of the biggest remnants of colonization that perpetuates the system. Because, like, I know in Sierra Leone, as a British colony, a school is in English, government is done
Yeah.
in English. It's like you having to use a European mindset in a sense to be able to get any type of work done. So I love that you're
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
being able to get that language back and really making that important. The same thing for me. I I bug my mom all the time because I think they didn't teach us how to speak crew because they wanted to be able to gossip in our face without us being able to hear. So I'm coming back anytime she says something, like I done started a little dictionary just for the crew language. And it's just translating it word by word. I'm just putting
Yeah.
together a
Mhm,
little document.
mhm.
But no, I think that that's very important. And I really like what you said about before you think about I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do X, Y, Z. It's like you're coming into a situation that you have no context of. You don't know. So it's very important to really get in and connect with the community. I know specifically for real estate, the reason I wanted to get into commercial real estate was to do development in Sierra Leone because there's a lot of people who aren't Sierra Leone and they're doing development. And if you're doing any type of business in the community and you don't really have an understanding, you don't have a context, there's no way that what you develop is really going to solve the problems or the needs of the people in that community. So I love that advice of getting in there, being humble, and then learning, listening with an open mind so you can really see what challenges there are and how you can help, as opposed to a lot of people go in like, oh, I want to invest, I'm going to do this, but they just don't know. So
That's a
now,
really
yeah,
important point you just made about
yeah.
business. And I'm just basically piggybacking off exactly what you mentioned. You cannot go and it's not advisable to go into any venture without conducting a needs assessment, without
Yeah,
Yeah.
conducting a feasibility study, without conducting a market research, analysis. It's unwise. So I have the same exact thought process for development and the public sector work that I do. I'm interested in. I must conduct a diagnostic, so to speak, of the situation before I try to prefer any type of solution.
yeah.
Because again, like I said, it'll humble you. So you might as well take your time first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a question?
Uh, well, I just want to know more about the work that you're doing on the
Oh yeah.
ground as of now. If you can just kind of explain what that is, what challenges are, we can talk about
Yeah.
that.
Sure, sure. One thing I will just quickly say, one thing I love about us as Black people, us as Africans, is we're extremely, extremely creative, we're innovative. And one thing that I love as a Nigerian that my nephew, Nigeria has made me innovative by necessity, right? Nigerians are innovative by necessity. You are in many ways going to be in an environment where you don't have everything available to you. So you got to get creative. You got to figure out something. You got to, make a way where there is no way, that type of thing. So what I'm currently doing, I wear different hats, which is pretty much why I said we're creative. Out of necessity, I've started myself on different paths, and I wear different hats. So I am a consultant. I'm an international development consultant, and my focus is on Africa as a region, as a continent. I am currently working on several projects, and one specifically was focused on the National Assembly. It is my baby. It is something that I'm really excited about, and I'm happy to elaborate more on pretty much why I've decided to focus on the legislature, the legislative arm of government in Nigeria right now. I support different projects in terms of design, in terms of research, monitoring and evaluation, and that's more so government, but then I also am a business consultant. So research, consumer intelligence, strategy, things like that. I am also in grants administration. So I work for an endowment, and my portfolio is basically covers Uganda, Kenya, Somaliland, and Nigeria. So we fund or we support NGOs in those countries. That's my portfolio specifically. So I know it's kind of
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Can you
we
elaborate
can
more
dive a
about?
little bit deeper if you want. Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear more about the National Assembly and what you do
Sure.
with them. That's I enjoy government and politics and leadership and things like
Really
that. So
enjoy government and politics is a crazy statement.
well, I enjoy. Yes, I like I that is what I would want to if
Mhm.
that's
Yeah,
if I was to be involved in things going on in Liberia, it would be something along those lines. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's where
yeah,
my
Yeah, and I'm
that's
because
so
fair.
happy to hear
you're
this,
the
Llewellyn,
business
honestly.
guy. We would come to you for the cash to be able to fund some stuff.
I'm really happy to hear this, Llewellyn, and I know that, people try and shy away from politics, and I'm like, please, if I can encourage everyone who is interested in politics to actually pursue it, I would. I say that because, as we all know, Africa is an extremely young continent, right? In Nigeria alone, you have more than 65% of the population is under the age of 25. And yet our leaders are not reflective of that demographic. So you have the most powerful positions, the power brokers, the decision makers are 70 and up, but your population is extremely young. And I think it's important to have as many of us taking up space, as many of us occupying or having a seat at the table as possible. These are the decisions that are influencing your lives and your businesses. So for business people who think that they shouldn't be interested in politics, I'm like, oh, wait until a legislation passes that completely bans the importation of furniture or rice or cars or whatever your business is, because that's very feasible. It's very possible. Like I mentioned, Nigeria, out of necessity, you do a lot of creative things. I used to work in the oil and gas sector. And after the oil and gas sector, I worked in the financial markets. And I worked in government and regulatory relations in a financial market company. It was actually a securities exchange. And so I was required, as a government and regulatory relations person, I was actually required to sit at the table and have access to, or basically follow all of the National Assembly's activities. I needed to know what the Senate Committee on Capital Markets was talking about, what the House of Representatives Committee on Capital Markets was talking about. I needed to make sure that they were fully aware of the sector, the industry, because unfortunately, we don't really have the same types of requirements to be a legislator as maybe more developed nations. You only are required to have, I think, a secondary school degree, which is like high school. So you can imagine legislators with, only high school degrees. Many of them do not have any private sector experience beyond, maybe they don't have any private sector experience at all. They are going to be initiating policy or drafting policy and laws on your industry that they know very little about. So in my role as a government and regulatory relations professional, I was meant to engage the committee members and make sure that they understood the industry, understood the sector, and they were not about to do something that was going to be detrimental to our business. And from my time as a government and regulatory relations person, I became more interested in legislation generally. So just to give you a sort of quick overview, and because we're American, you probably already have a stronger understanding. Nigeria has an almost identical system to America. So we have a bicameral system. We have a Senate and a House of Representatives. They are the legislative branch of government. We have legislative, executive, and judicial. Operate pretty much similarly. We have 360 House of Representative members. They represent the 36 states of the country and the Federal Capital Territory. Then we have about, I think it's 109 senators now. I can't remember. A couple of them died. Yeah, I think it's 109. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. So again, they are meant to be the closest to the Nigerian people. They each representative, and this is the same exact thing here. You should know who your national or who your local representatives are, as well as your senators. They are the closest to the people. They are representative of the people. Their constituencies, they're answerable to us. So the people who are pretty much meant to vote or meant to initiate or meant to take a position on these laws and these policies are our legislators. And I learned that, again, the requirements to be legislator is you just have to have a diploma. And again, you have people who are struggling economically, and they don't know that there are frameworks that are governing their industry that the legislators have a direct impact on. So I decided that my interest was going to focus on legislators because of their access to the people. And in this journey that I've been on with this project, which I'll touch on in a second, I also came to understand that our civil service system generally is a whole juggernaut on its own. So it's not just legislators, it's legislative staff, it's the bureaucrats, those are the people who are meant to deliver the dividends of democracy via the legislators. And they also do not have criteria that I think is suitable for the work that they do. Meaning, again, you can pretty much just show up tomorrow and all of a sudden work in the office of Honorable so-and-so. So the project that I'm currently consulting with is called the National Assembly Library and Research Center. And it is pretty much modeled after the Library of Congress. Have any of y'all been to the Library of Congress? Anyone? No.
Nah,
Okay, so the
we
Library of
lived in
Congress
DC.
is in DC, and it's actually the oldest, I think it's the oldest library in the world. Could be wrong, not sure, but it is the
Aside
biggest
from the library
and
that
the
destroyed in
oldest.
Alexandria, you mean?
So the Library of Congress basically houses all sorts of like important documents, right? So you have all these like the Constitution and all that. It's part of this like this system because you also have it's called the archives. There's an archive building. I can't remember the word or the name now, but Library of Congress ultimately has what is called a Congressional Research Service, CRS. So this is basically an institution that supports Congress. So your Congress people, whoever your congressman or congresswoman is, you actually should know that they have a research service called the Congressional Research Service. So anything that your congressperson needs to be able to support their work on a day-to-day basis, the research service is available to them. So let's say, Llewellyn, you are a congressperson for ward whatever and so constituency, and you want to discuss foreign policy, let's say US foreign policy or interest in, you name it, country, let's say Botswana. Okay, you can submit a ticket to the Congressional Research Service and basically say, get me all the information I could possibly need on US foreign policy regarding Botswana in the last 20 years. And it's their work to get that information to you. So they support the staffers who support the Congress people. So what we are trying to do with this project in Nigeria is pretty much model the institution after the Library of Congress and the Congressional Research Service. So one, it is meant to build the capacity of our legislators, because once again, you have people who are going to be introducing laws that are going to affect the nation, who unfortunately do not have the preparation to be in those positions. So this is meant to be an institution that provides them with training, capacity development, and also a research body that supports their work on a day-to-day basis. So if we have a petroleum industry decision, actually there's a petroleum industry conversation happening right now. We have, well, I won't go into that, but we have a petroleum industry conversation happening right now in the nation where we are meant to be refining our own petroleum products. And let's say one of the legislators on the Petroleum Industry Committee, right, needs certain information on that sector. The research service is meant to provide that information within a very short amount of time to be able to discuss this on the National Assembly floor. So I'll stop there. Any questions?
Well, no, that's good, and I think that's very important. Two questions. One, have they ever thought about, or would it even make sense to increase the qualifications necessary to the people that are working in government to where they have some kind of understanding and knowledge on the stuff that they're making decisions about? And then two, I feel like every African country, well, I mean every country in general, we just kind of look at it more with more scrutiny in Africa. Every African government is dealing with some form of corruption and people kind of doing certain things. So, and I think we look at it more of a microscope when they're doing the same thing here, just maybe in a different sense of how they're doing it. But
Blatant here.
yeah, it's like there's more of a system where you can kind of sweep things under the rug. It's more
Yeah.
expensive. We have lobbyists and people can do your corruption for you, essentially. But I guess my second question after increasing qualifications is like, are is that something that they're looking to address? Do you notice that, or like, kind of what's your thoughts on corruption, or is that something that even you touch in your role, your capacity?
Right, right. So I 150% agree with our need to increase the requirements, right? So there was an effort by a group of young people, a group of young, amazing advocates with what we call the Not Too Young to Run bill. The idea was basically to lower the age of the requirement to run for president in Nigeria, which they were able to do. I think it's now 35. My memory is not working today, but we were able to lower the age via that effort. And I applaud everyone who was a part of that. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because it's very difficult to get people to vote against their own interests. So if you know that you don't have anything beyond a diploma, it's going to be very difficult to convince yourself to vote and say, actually, we should increase the requirement to be a legislator to have at least a college degree. So when you have, let's say 85%, it could be higher, of people who potentially do not possess qualifications beyond the diploma, they're likely not going to vote in that favor, which is why I'm an advocate of those of us young people who are qualified, who are passionate, who are hungry for a better Africa. I highly encourage you to take up space. I highly encourage you to learn the system and be a part of it so that you know what exactly you're dealing with. You can't fight an enemy you don't actually know. You don't want to bring a knife to a gunfight, as they say. So you want to be able to engage the system and understand what exactly is going on for you to be able to make changes, in my opinion. So I agree. I think we should increase the requirements, but getting the existing crop of leaders to vote in favor of increasing the requirements, it's going to be very difficult. The only way we can get like a majority is when we become part of the system, of when we decide to engage this very complex, murky, frustrating juggernaut of a system. Speaking on corruption, very similar ideas on that as well. Corruption exists everywhere. We know that corruption exists everywhere. I don't think there's any system of government that I have not witnessed or observed in one way, shape, or form that there may be some corruption. But I hate how overt it is in our context because it makes us look like we're not serious people. I have seen it as an observer. I have seen it manifest in so many different ways at both the political level and also the local level. I go to let me give an example. I go to my mechanic and my mechanic knows the work or the part that I'm asking him to help me purchase costs a certain amount. He'll come back and he'll tell me it's 15 times that amount because he knows I probably don't know anything about cars, which I don't. And how am I meant to respond knowing that you are being deceitful, you're being dishonest? That part that you purchased or asked you to purchase does not cost 15 times what you said it costs. So I think corruption exists at many different levels, but in terms of corruption, in terms of government, like I said, it is way more overt in the African context. And I think until the African people truly decide that they no longer want to operate under this corrupt, oppressive system, and it's going to perpetuate itself. It's actually built over the last several decades, it's actually built to be self-sustaining corruption. Because like I said, it's not just the politicians, it's the civil service system that feeds the beast. So if you're not addressing also the legislative aides, the staffers, the executive branch staffers, the judicial branch staffers, you are not addressing the problem. So until you're willing to occupy those spaces, we're only scratching the surface.
Yeah, I have a question, but before I want to touch on what you're talking about. This is why I said you're right. I don't technically enjoy government and politics. You're right by saying that, but I do enjoy the leadership, the discussion of leadership and what that means, and building healthy leaders and things like that. So when I say I enjoy it, I mean I see everything that you just talked about in answer to his question. It's a chain reaction. So it's like, well, we may need to adjust the age, but we can't adjust the age because folks won't vote against their own interests, and they won't vote against their own interests. They're not highly educated. So now we have to go attack the education system and all the things that come along with that. So it's like, it's the chain reaction, and I just recognize that when we're talking about government and politics, if we really want to make real change in our spaces, we have to do it through government and politics and developing, which for me goes back to developing good leaders and building good leaders and holding our leaders accountable. Even in that conversation, I look at not just holding the leaders accountable, but then even having somebody who will educate the masses on how to choose a good leader, and how to choose good government officials and things like that in the process. But my question, and then I guess we'll wrap it up because I think we've been having a really good conversation so far. But my question for you, you do a lot. I also do a lot, so I understand what it is to wear multiple hats and things like that. Ultimately, for you, what would you say your vision is, your end goal, in all of this when it's all said and done, for you? What would you say? What would you be able to look back on and say to yourself, "Well done, my good and faithful Chinenye"?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so man, these questions. I wasn't ready. No, but I think that's a wonderful question. And I'm happy you said for me, because I've been thinking about this quite a bit. One thing I'm really passionate about is making sure, just like you said, we're developing leaders, developing the capacity of leaders. One thing that I will pat my back and say I can walk away from this life or whatever and feel accomplished, or feel like I've achieved something. I want to give platforms to leaders who are ready to serve, who have a heart for the people. Like, I actually want to platform them. That's why I'm so passionate about training and capacity development in terms of legislators, because they're so close to the people. I know they kind of call it kingmaker. I don't want it to come across like, I don't like the way that it sounds, kingmaker, but ultimately I want to raise or support the next generation of African leaders, not even just Nigeria. Like, I'm interested in so many countries across the continent. I want to be able to say that Llewellyn, I can see is a leader, who is passionate, who is driven, who is focused, who is experienced. Sita is passionate, driven, focused. I want you to have an opportunity, and I want to make sure that whatever I can do in my capacity to make sure you get that opportunity, I want to say that I've done it. So one thing I'm doing, like I mentioned, I manage a portfolio of NGOs across Uganda, Kenya, Somaliland, and Nigeria. And one thing I have been doing is I've been helping identify potential grantees that we can support. I'm helping ensure that they're getting a fair shot, a fair opportunity to access funds from this pool of funds that we have. So I want to platform people and say, listen, I've seen this person, I've seen the work they're doing. Give this person a shot to lead. If it's local government chairman, if it's House of Representatives member, if it's president, no matter what position it is. It could also be titan of industry. If you're passionate about real estate, or you're passionate about the oil and gas industry, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to lead in those sectors, in those spaces. I'm tired of seeing people that are just self-centered and have no interest in seeing African countries grow, develop, and thrive, and stop being called third world countries and stop being called all these derogatory, awful things. I want to see people who want African countries to compete at the international level in positions where they're able to do that. So for me, like I said, any opportunity that I have to elevate others who are passionate about their sector, their industry, I'm like, give me that opportunity to give this person that opportunity, or support this person, or provide more visibility to this person or this NGO or this whatever. Then I will know I've done well.
And I know, for just for, I guess, confidentiality purposes, you've already been doing some of this work with folks in Nigeria and things like that. But we won't say names, just because confidentiality purposes and things like that. But you have already been making these impacts with people, and so thank you for that. Thank you for being a thought leader in the space, and making sure that that we are developing the right way, that we're moving forward in the right way. We have one question that we ask everybody at the end, and I'm gonna let Sita go ahead and ask that question.
Oh yeah, for sure. Definitely got to bring this back. So the question is, for someone who's traveling to Africa for the first time, what would you recommend is the one experience that they need to get? Is something they need to see, something they need to try? Like, what would you say?
Ooh! Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Someone traveling to Africa for the first time. I mean, if you don't have a sensitive stomach, If you don't have I'm a cuisine person, but if you have a
Yeah.
sensitive stomach, I'm not sure I should recommend this to you. Africa is such a beautiful, beautiful continent, and I think I mean, I'm just scratching the surface. I think in the last 3, 4 years, I've really prioritized Africa travel,
Yeah.
and it is something that I was talking to you, Llewellyn, about. I I think it's the greatest decision I've made in my life to start prioritizing Africa travel. The continent is vast, it's beautiful. There's nothing you won't find in Africa that you're looking for in other places. Nothing you won't find. No experience you won't find. I love cuisines and I love fragrances. So again, it depends. If you have a sensitive stomach, maybe I can't encourage you to try local food. But if you don't have a sensitive stomach, 150% recommend you try the local food and, just spend time in a community wherever you are. I get it. I love staying in, the luxury resorts and things. I know Africa has that in abundance. But if you do have an opportunity, volunteer in a community near you. If you've got like a Saturday to spare on your trip, reach out to a nonprofit organization that, and thank God for the internet. You can go online and you can find a nonprofit organization and just say, hey, I'm coming to this country or this town in a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and I would really love to spend some time, maybe volunteer with you on a Saturday. I'd just love to spend some time and hear about the work you do. There's a massive NGO network, there's a massive development network, and they will never turn you down if you say you would like to volunteer and spend time with their community. So apart from culinary experience, apart from fragrance experience, definitely reach out to a local NGO and say, I'm coming to town, or I'm considering coming to this place. Can I spend a Saturday with you guys and see what you guys do? I'd love to support your work. Give that NGO visibility, because there's so many NGOs, not even just NGOs, companies as well, who have social responsibility projects doing incredible, incredible stuff. But your visibility that you're able to offer them could be the difference between
Yeah.
where they are and where they're trying to go.
Oh,
Awesome.
lovely. Well said.
Well, thank you, Shanae. Thank you for joining us. I keep calling you the name that I've called you,
Listen,
and
Llewellyn, you're
it's
allowed
bothering
to.
me.
You know me as Janae, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, that third culture thing, not being able to pronounce my own name translated into me just saying, you can call me that, and it's fine. So there's nothing wrong with you calling me Shanae at
Okay.
all.
All right. All
Yeah.
right.
Well,
Well,
Shanae, how can the people reach out to you, or if you want them to, or find out how to do business with you and so on and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't really touch. I know I've been talking a lot about all sorts of things. We didn't touch much about business. One thing I am interested in is U.S. Africa trade, and especially financial technology. So I'm looking at ways to get funds to Africa and from Africa digitally. So I'm interested in blockchain and digital
Mm.
currencies, cryptocurrency. We didn't talk about that, but maybe another day. So if you are in that space, I would definitely love for you to reach out to me. Instagram, X, what is my Instagram? At c.l.monde, which is Monde. I can always share my email, and where you see Llewellyn, just you might see me somewhere. So
this is right. All right. Well, fam, this is another episode of Afronomics. We're coming to a close, but thank you for joining us. Make sure if you haven't checked out the episodes before this, do that. We have enough episodes for you to binge watch. So if you ain't been doing it, do it. Tell your mama, tell your brother, your sister, your auntie, your bald-headed granny, everybody. Follow us, subscribe, like, do all the stuff. We'll see you next time.
Why she gotta be bald? All right. Peace.